Welcome back to Bowers Creation. Got me a nice warm cup of coffee this morning. It's a cold morning, couple days here before Christmas. And check out my new workwear. You know, usually I'm rocking the khaki Pearl Snap Wranglers, but I found these at Cavender's. They're called Cowboy Workwear, and they're identical to the Wranglers. I'm not getting paid to say this by any means. I just like saving y'all money and saving money myself. But these are about $10 cheaper than the Wrangler Pearl Snaps, and they're almost identical. So if you got a Cavender's in your area, be sure to go check them out. Anyways, what we're working with today is vegetable cans. Now, vegetable can storage is not the greatest. I normally keep them in these cases, and I like to buy a case at a time, but here lately Walmart's been selling them for 50 cents a can, which is cheaper than Sam sells the case when you do the math on it. And when I keep them in the boxes like this, you got to pull everything out to put the new ones in the back if you want to rotate them. So naturally, I jumped on the internet for inspiration, and this is kind of what I found.
Alright, let's see what we can find here. So this would be simple, but I don't have any wall space left in my house for something like that. This is more like what I want. I don't have a CNC machine, and this one actually looks a little flimsy. Look at these guys. They took up the whole wall. I don't know how many cans they could hold, but they got a lot of vegetable cans. But this right here, this looks like something we can mimic. Here's some more of these, but again, I just don't have any wall space. But I think we could come up with something similar to this. That's what we're going to try.
So I'm not the greatest at these how-tos just yet. I'm still learning. But this is what I done, and maybe between seeing how I done it, you could kind of figure out on your own. I'm assuming most of y'all do quite a bit of woodworking yourself if you're watching the channel. But I got out the sketch pad using a vegetable can. I checked all my clearances, made sure I was happy with everything, and kind of drew me out a pattern. So this thing is going to be about 16 3/8 inches deep from front to back and 9.5 inches tall. Now I want to double mine up. I want to be able to store 2 different cans, maybe corn here and some green beans here. So I'm going to double the height pretty much and see what we could come up with. I'm going to go 4 wide, so I'm going to have an option to store up to 8 different cans of vegetables. And here's some measurements kind of based off of what I'm building. Again, you'll have to kind of lay out and do your own designing if you don't want to completely replicate mine, or if you just want to do one layer. But I need one piece that's 17 by 20.5, 2 that's 16 3/8 by 20.5, 2 that's 16 3/8 by 18, and 3 that's 15 7/8 by 17. So what I'm going to be using for this project, this is some 12mm sandy birch. I got it from Home Depot. Believe it or not, I went out just like most of you normally would and had to buy something from Home Depot. The specialty supply house that I normally get stuff from was closed. It was a Saturday, and I wanted to get this project started. So I hope I don't regret it, but we're going to give it a shot, see how it works. What I'm going to do now is go ahead and chunk out these measurements, and instead of cutting them exactly to size, I'm going to cut them just a little big. That way I can play with them, lay them out once I get them smaller. But I'm going to get this chunked up so it's not a big old piece of plywood here in the middle of the floor, and we'll go from there. Alright, so I got all my plywood chunked out. Like I said, I cut all my pieces big so I could lay them out, get them exact cut here in a little bit. But what that allowed me to do was get some scrap and fall off pieces. And yesterday, before I started the video, I I actually made these two pieces, this one here in the center, and then this one here for the cans to roll on. I got them right here. I made them on the sander by hand, but to duplicate them, because I need 16 of them, I think I'm going to use a router. And what I done is I cut my piece of scrap to the exact length of this longer one, and I'm going to set it on there. I put some screw holes in it so I could screw it down, route it, and then I'm going to cut it off at 1 inch. And I'm going to repeat that process 16 times. Now the important thing here is you're going to need a left and a right. So do 8 of them one way, and then you're going to have to flip it over and do 8 of them that way. That way you end up with a left and a right, and we'll be able to hide our screw holes when we assemble it here in a little bit. Alright, so this is how I'm going to go about this next step. So the first thing, I got my flush cutter bit right here with a bottom bearing. I have an 1/8 inch round over, also with the bottom bearing. And then one thing I found out very quickly is I made these plywood templates and they didn't hold up to the bearing on the router. So I had to go back and I had to make me some hardwood ones. Now one little tip is I labeled it left and then on this side right. That way I know which one I got. And all I'm going to do is take this and flush it up to the top here. I'll screw it down. Like I said, with the left and right, we'll be able to hide our screws in the future. Screw it down just like that. I'll flip it over. And then I'm going to flush this off. Now I'm going to take my little 1/8 inch round over and I want to round over just this top and then this front edge. Something like this right here. You see where I rounded just here and then here. Now this step is very important. You want to draw you a line on the back of your jig, just like that. And this is what we got right now. Let me set you up over at the table saw and I'll show you the next step. I'm just going to line up on my line. And I'm going to hack it off just like that. Now what I've decided to do is I don't think I'm going to make this jig and route them all. I've decided to make 32 of these. And if you noticed on that one, I don't know if you could see it, I got off on the line a little bit, cut a little too much off. I could come back and cut this later to make this piece. So I'm going to make 32 of them. The ones I like the most and then the most consistent, I'm going to keep whole, and the ones that ain't as consistent, I'm going to cut off to make this piece. Alright, so after making 32 of these, I found the 16 that was the most consistent. I got 8 lefts and 8 rights. These over here wasn't so consistent. So I'm going to hack those down, and they're going to make this top piece right here. I made these 15 3/4, so I'm going to cut these to 13 5/8. We'll just cut the ear off, and now make those pieces. One thing to note, I'm not going to show it on video, But once I cut these off, I'm going to go ahead and route all the way around on just one side. One side's going to nail to a piece of plywood. So we just want one side routed, but again, you want to lefts and rights. I'm going to use my fancy saw stop to cut them all off the exact same. If you want to see how I made this, I do have a video series for those who are new to the channel, and it'll show you exactly how I made this saw stop. Alright, now that I got that done, I'm going to take me a little bit of sandpaper, and I'm going to just gently work on my roundovers, get them kind of smoothed out on all 32 parts, and then I think we could finally be ready to start putting this thing together. Okay, so I started laying one of these out, and I'm going to kind of catch you up to speed here, but the first thing I realized is I told you this centerpiece right here was supposed to be 13 5/8. It really needs to be 12 5/8 if you're going to mimic my measurements. The second thing I noticed, I've already nailed one of these together, is half of these curved pieces that we made, half of the lefts, half of the rights, is going to be routed on three sides. The bottom one will only be routed on the top and front. These pieces are routed all the way around, and then this piece here will be routed on the top, the front, and then the bottom. Don't route the back. You'll see why in a little bit. Now, the one absolute I have for you, I kind of made a mock-up of what we got going on here, is these middle uprights will be 15 3/4 wide by 17 inches tall. That's the only absolute I could give you. The rest is going to be based off your material thickness. But I'll show you how I'm going to find my other measurements based off of my material thickness. So I'm going to continue nailing these on. The measurements for these are 3 1/4. Back to our drawing. The measurements for these are 3 1/4 from the top of this one to the bottom of that one. Or if you want to go from the bottom, it's 4 1/4 from the bottom of this one to the bottom of this one. So you could use either one of those measurements. It'll work out just fine. Lay it out, and it should look something like this. Now I'm going to nail it on front and back of all three of the middle uprights, and then I'll show you how I get my measurements for the rest of the box. Alright, so this is going to be exactly how I'm gluing and nailing these on. So from the bottom to my first mark is 4 1/4, and then from that mark I went 4 1/4, and then 4 1/4 again. And now I'm going to take one that's routed on the top and front, sharp edge still on the bottom. I'm going to put a little bit of glue on it. And this first one could just be flush with the bottom, flush with the front right here. It's not too difficult. I'm using 3/4 brads. That's just to hold it in place. My material's just under a 1/2 inch. So that'll hold it in place until the glue dries. I'm counting on the glue to do all the work. Now for this next one, I'm going to use a square. Line it up on my mark right there. Again, a little bead of glue. The most important part is to make sure you're good and flush on the front. Everything else will just work out in the wash. Now on these middle sections, we're going to do both sides, just like that. So I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to start on the other side. When I get done with all these middle sections, I'll get back to you. Okay, now I need to determine what I want to rip my pieces to my box to. I do know that I want my back to sit inside up to here, but to where you don't see any of the edges. So it's going to be a material thickness wider than my center pieces. And how I'm going to determine what to rip it at is I flushed up one of my middle sections here. And then I'm just going to take a scrap piece, lay it right there, and I'm going to mark it. And that'll tell me how wide to rip all my parts from my box. Same thing on the height for my two sides. Is I'm just going to flush this up real good. I'm going to use 2 pieces of scrap wood. Make sure everything's exactly how you want it. And I'm just going to scribe me a little mark right there. Just like that. And now that'll tell me what height to cut my 2 sides at and the width to cut my 2 sides and my top and bottom to. Alright, now the last step we want to lay out. I believe I wanted 4 1/4 between my uprights for my vegetable can. The vegetable can was about 4 7/16, so 4 3/4 should give us a little bit of play. Make sure it fits in there good. And then 20 1/2 is what I get, and that's all going to depend on the thickness of material you use. Because I went 4 3/4 and then 1/2, 4 3/4 and 1/2. So that's all going to depend on what thickness of material you end up using. But that's what's going to work for me is 20 1/2 for my top and bottom. Okay, now that we have the sides sized up and our top and bottom cut down to size, we need to lay out our runners. But one important thing we need to remember is the bottom is going to go in here and be nailed to the side. So take you a piece of scrap lumber, the same thickness again, make you a little mark here and there, and then this mark is where we're going to start our layout, our 4 1/4 layout. So I'll go 4 1/4 from this mark, and then when I nail this runner on, it'll sit just like that. It'll actually have a little lip under there. That way our bottom has a place to nail to. I know I've emphasized this a bunch, but on these 2 sides, when you're nailing on these runners, remember you have a left and a right. So keep an eye on that. Here's your little cheat code when you're laying out left and rights. I got my marks on this one here. If I make sure I'm flush and set it next to this other one, I could go in and just draw my marks right across, just like that. Alright, we should have everything just about ready to start assembling it. I swapped out to some 1 1/4 brads, and yesterday we laid out our top and bottom, but I went ahead and put some lines on it so I have something to follow. Don't know if you can see that or not, but basically we're just going to build a box. Some of this I'll glue, some of it I won't. It depends on if I'm going to smear glue everywhere or not. size up the back now. I'm going to get it cut and shot in, and then I'll show you the steps to finish it up from there. So this pretty much finishes it up. I got the back nailed in. I did sand the face of it so I could route the inside and outside just to doctor it up a little bit. I got a lot of detail sanding left to do, and then I'm going to coat it real heavy in some linseed oil to finish it out. But all we got left to do now is see how it's going to work. It worked pretty good that time. To be honest, it is hanging up on some of these test runs I've done. I think if you're shoving several cans in there, that wouldn't be an issue, or at least it's not going to bother me none. It will hold 80 cans, 8 different styles, and that's going to work pretty good. If you got any suggestions, leave them in the comments down below. But in the meantime, it is Christmas Eve. I'm going to go over to my dad's house and celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ. I hope all y'all have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and we'll catch you in the next one.